I counted recently, which was probably a mistake. On a busy day, I can speak to close to 70 people through meditation work, therapy work, friends, clients, students, and the normal collection of messages that accumulate when you've known people in a few different worlds. The total number of conversations I'm loosely carrying is closer to 137. Exactly 137, at least when I counted last. Some of those conversations happen every day. Others go quiet for a week and then reappear with a paragraph starting with, "This might sound crazy, but..." Those are often the most interesting ones. A few people send memes. Some of them send voice notes about their relationships, dreams, spiritual lives, sometimes panic attacks, business, prayer, or something weird they saw while they were meditating. There are former students I first worked with like 6 years ago who still message me regularly. I usually meet at least one new person online through the podcast every day. Well, whatever meet means in this context. I didn't grow up imagining this much social interaction. For most of my childhood, I was socially isolated. There are a few reasons I can think of for that. Maybe neurodivergence was part of it, trauma, circumstance, filling in whatever was in between that. The explanation is important, but the experience was really simple. I spent a lot of time alone in my room, or kind of with my sister but not interacting, or with someone in the room but not really interacting with them. That doesn't mean my parents were neglectful. It just means the environment was the kind I'm describing. When people hear that I was isolated, they sometimes assume that I must naturally be introverted. I can understand why, but I don't think that was ever exactly true. I liked people. I wanted connection. I just didn't know how to enter it safely or consistently. There is a difference between wanting solitude and becoming used to it because the world outside the room feels terrifying. A child can spend years alone and still contain an extrovert. That extrovert just develops strangely. It usually learns how to survive without an audience, and it has conversations internally. It starts becoming observant and starts studying people rather than participating with them. On occasion, it develops a rich imagination. Sometimes it becomes hyper-aware of every shift in somebody's tone because understanding people feels necessary for safety. Eventually, the child grows up and enters the world carrying all of that. My life expanded in ways I could not have predicted. I became a professional athlete and traveled around the world. I actually left my room. Fighting brought me into gyms, stadiums, hotel rooms, training camps, hospitals, airports, and other weird places. It also brought me into friendships that were formed under conditions where pretending was really hard. Professional fighting creates unusual bonds. You spend weeks or months training with people who are helping you prepare to enter a situation where another trained person is going to attempt to hurt you in public. Everybody is exhausted, bodies are injured, and money is super uncertain. Emotions usually boil to the surface. The person holding pads for you has seen you confident, terrified, dehydrated, overtrained, and occasionally making extremely poor decisions about things I'd rather not talk about. Maybe that was too specific. Those relationships can become permanent. I still speak to people from that part of my life. We might not be in the same country or occupy the same reality anymore, but some connection remains. I think you learn things about each other in combat sports that normal social life can take years to reveal. Later, I had a son, which created an entirely different kind of relationship. Fatherhood asks for forms of presence that I don't think friendship ever does. Your child isn't particularly impressed by your accomplishments. He's more interested in whether you remembered what he told you yesterday, and whether you're available when something matters to him. I also ran businesses. Business introduces you to another category of human connection. Employees, customers, partners, difficult people, wonderful people, and people who teach you important lessons by creating problems you will never allow again. Oh my God, so many problems. Meditation widened the circle even further. The conversations became more intimate. People speak differently when they're discussing grief or prayer or consciousness. The parts of themselves they don't usually show were things we talked about every day. You can know someone socially for 10 years and never hear what a meditation student might tell you in the second session. That kind of work accelerates closeness. The normal sequence of friendship gets rearranged. You may know almost nothing about someone's taste in music, yet you know the precise memory that appears when they become quiet. You know how they experience anxiety in their body. You know what they're afraid God thinks of them. You know about the moment during a psychedelic experience when they felt forgiven, or terrified, or in my case, briefly convinced that I was talking to the plants in the kitchen. These conversations stay with you. Even when a formal period of work ends, the relationship doesn't always disappear. I still hear from meditation students I worked with years ago. They update me about marriages, children, losses, health problems, and the surprising directions life has taken. I'm glad they do. I genuinely enjoy people. I really love hearing what's happening beneath the version they present publicly. I love the moment when a conversation moves past performance and finally becomes real. Whether the subject is emotion, meditation, fighting, video games, or some bizarre experience that person is afraid to tell anybody else, I usually want to understand it, or at least listen. The podcast has extended that tendency into places I would probably have never reached on my own. Almost every day, someone new appears. A person hears an episode while driving, working, lying awake at night, or going through something hard. They send a message because an idea landed at the right time, I guess. Sometimes they've been listening from the very beginning before they say anything. From like year one. From their perspective, they already know me. They know stories from my life, my strange set of beliefs, my occasionally present sense of humor, my health issues, and I guess even the way I think through certain subjects. From my perspective, they appeared that morning. That asymmetry is one of the strangest parts of making anything online. A person can spend 30 hours listening to you before you learn their name. By the time they message, the relationship already has weight on one side. They may trust you, they may feel understood. They might have cried during an episode or repeated something you said during a difficult moment. Then a notification arrives on my phone. I'm suddenly present inside a life I knew nothing about a few seconds earlier. And I'm not gonna lie, I always answer. And that's how the number becomes 137. Technology has made this kind of social existence possible. Without phones, messaging apps, social media, and the ability to maintain relationships across continents, most of these people would not be part of my daily life. In another period of history, I might have known the people in my physical community and maintained letters with a few distant friends. The athlete I trained with in another country would probably become a memory. Former students would move away. A listener who connected with an episode would never be able to reach me, nor I them. Now, everybody, including me, remains potentially present. Distance no longer ends a relationship. Time doesn't always end it either. A message can revive a conversation after 3 years, as though somebody just briefly left the room. A huge part of me thinks this is beautiful. I know people in different countries, professions, religions, and stages of life. My phone contains fighters, artists, parents, doctors, business owners, old friends, some new ones, my grandfather, and people whose entire role in my life began with them sending a message at 2 in the morning. I don't think human history prepared us for this. For most of our existence, the number of people who could directly request our attention was limited by geography. A person had to be near you, know where you lived, or send something that took weeks to arrive. Now, hundreds of people can enter the same psychological room. They don't experience themselves as a crowd. Each person experiences one conversation with me. I experience all of them together. I think that creates a problem which is hard to explain without sounding super ungrateful. I'm honored that people trust me. My ego enjoys it too, obviously. I would love to say that I receive all this attention with pure spiritual humility, but I don't think that would be honest. There is something satisfying about being asked for advice. It feels good when people believe you have useful insight. Being wanted can be intoxicating, especially for someone who spent much of childhood alone in terms of peers. If my parents listen to this, relax, I know you were there. The isolated child doesn't disappear when the adult becomes socially successful. He notices every single message. A part of him still finds it miraculous that people want to speak to him. They're not just tolerating his presence, they're actively asking for it. That can become difficult to refuse. When a person tells you they need your perspective, saying no can feel like returning to the room where nobody was asking. This is where the ego and the soul begin to disagree. The ego looks at 137 conversations and thinks, this many people value me. This many people need me. The soul seems more concerned with what it means to be divided across so many lives. How present can one person actually be? At what point does connection become distribution? There are days when the network feels meaningful. I speak with someone who's grieving. Another person tells me they finally started meditating. A former student sends good news. A friend from my fighting years checks in and asks me how my face is doing. And a podcast listener writes something that reminds me why I even do this in the first place. On those days, the technology feels almost sacred. Human beings separated by oceans can remain involved in one another's lives. Someone does not have to endure a difficult night alone because another person is available through a small, glowing rectangle. Then, there are days when the phone feels like 137 doors with people standing behind them. Nobody's doing anything wrong. Each message is reasonable by itself. The pressure comes from accumulation. One person wants advice about a relationship. Another has sent a long voice note about a spiritual experience. A client needs to reschedule. Someone is worried about their child. A listener has a theory about an episode. An old friend has finally replied to the message I sent 3 months ago. A family member needs something. 2 people just want to talk. The conversations overlap psychologically even when they're separated into different apps. I may be speaking to someone while remembering that I still owe 5 other people a response. Halfway through giving advice, another notification appears. Resist looking, then wonder whether it's urgent. The person in front of me deserves full attention, but some portion of my mind is managing the queue. This isn't the same as community in the older sense. A physical community shares context. People know what season you're in, and they can see when you're tired. They may understand that someone has already asked something of you that day. Digital relationships almost always arrive without that information. Each person encounters the version of you available through the device. They don't see the other conversations. This creates a strange form of invisible labor. I can spend an entire day emotionally engaged with people and still appear to have been sitting alone in a room. There are no visible miles traveled, no crowded office, no obvious evidence that my attention has moved through dozens of emotional environments. And my body knows. By evening, I may have absorbed grief, excitement, confusion, fear, and 6 completely different theories about consciousness. I've changed tone repeatedly. One person needed humor, another needed seriousness. Someone needed reassurance, while another needed me to stop reassuring them and say something direct. Being available across that many emotional contexts requires constant adjustment. Sometimes I enjoy it. The extroverted part of me feels alive around people. Conversation gives me energy, particularly when it moves somewhere authentic. The difficulty is that deep connection is more expressive than casual contact. Talking to 70 people is one thing. Feeling responsible for what happens inside those conversations is another. I have to question that responsibility constantly. Am I actually responsible, or do I simply enjoy feeling necessary? That's a really uncomfortable question. People who give advice can begin to confuse usefulness with identity. If enough people ask for guidance, you may start believing your role is to remain available. Rest starts to feel selfish, and delayed replies feel like failures. Boundaries seem less like healthy limits and more like evidence that you're disappointing someone. This is really dangerous when your advice is, as I often remind people, questionable. I can offer experience, attention, intuition, training, and care, but I'm still one person interpreting another person's life through whatever they've chosen to share. I don't possess complete information. My mood, my health, and my own history affect what I notice. The volume of requests can create this illusion of authority. If many people want your perspective, the mind automatically concludes that your perspective must be unusually correct. Popularity and accuracy have never ever been the same thing. The soul seems to understand this better than the ego. My ego seems to count the people. My soul keeps wondering about the quality of my presence. I guess that's what lies at the heart of this episode, right? What is the meaning of being a small, weird part of so many lives? I don't really have a clear answer. Maybe there is no single meaning. Some relationships are temporary. A person may hear one sentence from me, use it during a difficult week, and never speak to me again. Another might remain connected for years. Someone I advise today might eventually become the person who helps me. Human relationships are rarely arranged in obvious hierarchies. The person who appears to be the teacher may be learning something more important than the student. The podcast listener who writes one thoughtful message may change the direction of an entire episode. A fighter I met 20 years ago can send 3 words and return me to a version of myself I had forgotten. Maybe meaning is carried through contact rather than ownership. I don't need to become central to every life I encounter. That's scary. And that might be where I create unnecessary pressure. I assume that if a relationship matters, I must maintain it constantly. But some relationships are meaningful exactly because they don't demand constant proof. I can care about someone without participating in every development. The idea is simple until someone sends a message and practical reality kicks in. Technology gives us access without teaching us how to manage the access. We can maintain more relationships than any previous generation, but our nervous system didn't receive an update. The phone expands the social world without expanding the day. Every new connection must fit into the same 24 hours. It competes with work, sleep, fatherhood, prayer, exercise, creative projects, and the need to sit somewhere without interpreting another person's emotional situation. The capacity to receive a message is not the capacity to hold it well. I think many people are discovering this in different forms. Their social lives look rich from the outside, but attention has become super fragmented. They know many people and rarely feel fully with anyone. A conversation continues while 3 others wait. Everybody is connected, yet the mind is constantly leaving. I don't think simple isolation is a solution. I already know that room. I don't want to return to a life where nobody can reach me. I think connection changed me. Friendship, fighting, meditation, and the podcast introduced me to parts of humanity I would have never found alone. People have been one of the great gifts of my life. The question is how to receive the gift without being consumed by its scale. I think that might require accepting a painful fact. I cannot be equally available to everybody who matters. The culture of instant communication makes delayed attention look like neglect. A message is delivered immediately, so the sender unconsciously expects the relationship to become immediate too. But honestly, I don't think emotional availability can operate at internet speed forever. Sometimes a message needs to wait. Sometimes I need to give a shorter answer. There are conversations I should probably not enter when my body is in pain or attention is already spent. Advice offered from depletion may satisfy the expectation of responsiveness while failing the person who asked. A boundary might be able to protect the quality of the relationship. I know that intellectually. Emotionally, though, the old, isolated part of me still resists. He remembers what it felt like when nobody was asking. He doesn't want to waste the miracle of being wanted. I have compassion for that part of myself, but he can't manage my phone. His hunger makes every request feel precious. My adult life requires discernment. There's also the possibility that being present in many lives is simply part of my work now. The podcast reaches people. Meditation and therapy are relational. Friendship accumulates when you travel, fight, build businesses, teach, and remain in contact with the past. Maybe the number is not a problem that needs to be solved. It might be a condition that I need to hold responsibly. The number 137 amused me because, of course it did. It's a strange number with a reputation for appearing in physics, mysticism, numerology, and the minds of people who enjoy believing the universe leave signatures in ordinary places. I'm not saying my contact list contains a cosmic revelation. It does feel appropriate, though, that the number turned out to be 137 instead of something normal like 124. My life has never been generous enough to give me an ordinary symbol. Still, the exact number is less important than what it represents. There are 137 open windows into other human lives. Some are bright, some are heavy. Several contain people asking me questions I don't know if anyone is qualified to answer. A few have been open for years. I'm standing in the middle, trying to decide which window needs attention and whether I've left enough room to experience my own life. That last part worries me. When you spend much of the day responding, your internal world can become reactive. Your attention is organized by whoever contacted you most recently. You wake up and enter other people's concerns before checking where your own mind has gone. A person can become socially important and privately absent. I don't want that. The fact that people trust me should make me more responsible for maintaining an interior life. not less. Advice requires silence somewhere behind it. Meditation teaching requires meditation. Emotional presence requires enough empty space for feelings to settle rather than being replaced by the next message. Otherwise, I become a switchboard. Information comes in, a response goes out, and the person operating the system gradually disappears. Maybe that's what my soul has been questioning. It's not asking me to abandon anyone. It's asking whether I'm still living from a center. There's a huge difference between being connected to many people and being scattered among them. I can feel when the difference changes. Connection leaves me tired sometimes, but the tiredness has meaning. Scattering feels thinner. I answer people without fully arriving. My words may still sound correct, but they come from habit. Advice becomes something I produce rather than something I discover with another person. The body usually notices first. My shoulders tighten. Breathing becomes shallow. Notifications start creating irritation before I know who sent them. I look at a message from someone I genuinely care about and feel the weight of another task. That's not the person's fault. It means my capacity has already been spent. The spiritually honest response is not to force warmth I don't currently possess. It's to step back long enough for care to become real again. I'm learning that availability and love are different. A person can answer immediately without caring very well. Another person may respond later and bring their full attention. I've often confused speed with devotion. Technology encourages that confusion because it seems to keep score. Read receipts, typing indicators, online status, and response times. Relationships start to resemble customer service systems. And I don't think a soul should be managed like a support ticket. That includes my own. I want to remain someone who enjoys people. I want the old students to message me. I want fighters from earlier parts of my life to remain part of the present. I want podcast listeners to tell me when an episode matters to them. I want my clients to feel supported, and I want my son to know that no amount of public connection replaces my relationship with him. The answer is probably not fewer people in some simple numerical sense. It's a clearer order of attention. Some relationships belong closer to the center. Others can remain meaningful at a distance. Work has defined hours, even when the work involves emotion. A podcast listener can matter without becoming a daily responsibility. Former students can stay connected without every message requiring a full session. This sounds obvious when stated calmly, but I think it becomes harder when the messages arrive from actual people I've spent time with. That's where practice begins. I have to tolerate the discomfort of not being immediately useful. I have some messages to answer right now, but I'm doing this instead. There's a spiritual lesson hidden in that discomfort. Maybe I'm not meant to solve everything I'm invited into. A person asking for my input doesn't automatically make their situation my responsibility. They may need a friend, a professional, a prayer, time, or an answer they discover without me. My ego, though, it loves being consulted. My soul seems relieved when I remember that I'm not the final authority in anybody's life. That allows the relationship to become more human. I can listen without performing wisdom. I can say I don't know. I can admit that my attention is limited. I can respond as a person rather than maintaining the character of someone who always has perspective. People might even trust that version more. The weird result of my social isolation is that now I have more connection than I know how to metabolize. I don't consider that a tragedy. I just think, it's a crazy reversal. The child in the room could never have imagined traveling the world, fighting professionally, running businesses, becoming a father, teaching meditation, making a podcast, and speaking daily with people across different countries. He would probably find the phone overwhelming. I sometimes do too, but I think he would be happy that the world eventually opened. The work now is learning that an open world still needs doors. A door doesn't reject everybody outside it. It allows someone to choose when to open, when to close, and who should be invited in, and who should be invited further in. Without doors, a home stops feeling like a home. Perhaps my inner life requires the same architecture. Maybe I can be a strange part of many people's lives without giving every person unlimited access to mine. I can appreciate being wanted without turning attention into proof of worth. Maybe I can offer advice while remembering how incomplete it might actually be. Most importantly, I can stop treating exhaustion as evidence that I care. Care isn't measured by how thoroughly you disappear into other people, trust me. I'm still learning what the correct balance looks like. Some days I enjoy all the conversations and feel grateful for the unlikely social world technology has created around me. On other days, 137 feels like an absurd number of people for one nervous system to carry. Both reactions are probably true. Connection has enriched my life. Connection can also stretch me thin enough that I lose contact with the person doing the connecting. I guess my task is to notice before that happens. Maybe the meaning of being present in so many lives is not that I'm unusually important. Perhaps my role is smaller and more ordinary. I appear for a moment, listen, say something useful or questionable, make a joke, share an idea, and then each person continues into a life far larger than the part I can see. I don't need to understand the total impact. Nobody does. We move through one another constantly. A sentence survives after the speaker forgets it. A friendship becomes part of someone's personality. A teacher remains present in the way a former student responds to pain years later. A podcast voice accompanies somebody through a long drive and then disappears when the engine stops. Being a small part of another person's life is already significant. I may have made it harder by thinking I needed to become a large part. So I'm trying to receive the oddness of this life without turning it into a responsibility to be everywhere. 137 conversations. I will not answer all of them today. The important ones will not necessarily be the loudest. The people I love most deserve a version of me that has not been completely distributed by the time I reach them. My own thoughts also deserve moments when they're not interrupted by a new request. The isolated child needed proof that people wanted him. The adult has that proof. Now he has to learn how to stay whole while being loved. This has been Idiot Mystic. Just so you know, I may reply late.